I thought I would begin by talking about the GCCA's role globally, and then give some context on why we decided to launch this initiative and our work going forward, and turning to some personal thoughts on why this matters both for India as a country and for GCCA India members. First, a word about the Global Cement and Concrete Association at the global level. As I'm sure most of you know, the GCCA was born a couple of years ago out of the Cement Sustainability Initiative with a view to becoming the global voice of both cement and concrete. As Lord Turner said, that's really important to have the both. We speak on behalf of the whole industry, and we do so by creating close links with our members so that we know we're speaking and advocating positions that are based on local expertise and priorities. And we translate those local voices to the world stage. Can we have the next slide, please, Andrea? Thank you. We've got members and affiliates on just about every continent, and right now we cover approximately 40% of the world's producers by capacity. Our priority, one of them, is growing our membership so that we can speak on behalf of more of the industry. And so here is where I warmly invite those GCCA India members who have not joined us globally to do so. We want your voice to be heard on the world stage as well as the regional level. And thank you ever so much to those who have already reached out to us. Can we have the next slide? Thank you. So turning to the climate ambition statement and why the GCCA's members felt it was time to take a stand. First, some background. We all know very well. We know that concrete is essential to life. Concrete is the building material that has shaped our world. And as a newcomer to this industry, I just find it astonishing how much this has played a role in developing our society. Think of the roads and railways we travel on, our homes, our schools, our hospitals. Concrete has literally built civilization, from the Pantheon to the Panama Canal. There's nothing that can take its place, and I feel really proud of that. I also like to think of the effect that our material has on other industries. One of my favorite facts is that the Panama Canal, which was built 100 years ago, has since then, of concrete of course, has since then saved about 700 million tons of CO2 emissions. So the shipping industry has really benefited from our product as well. We're a great asset to other industries as they grapple with their own emissions. And going forward, we realize that concrete will become more and more crucial to the world. And here I'll name just a few reasons. There are many others. First, it's been estimated that by the end of this century, an extra 1 billion homes will have to be built. If they're to be built right, to last, to be safe, to be clean, they will certainly rely on concrete. Second, as our climate changes, sustainable infrastructure, windmills, storm barriers, and the like will depend on our product, and demand for this infrastructure will grow hugely. Finally, in many countries, including India, of course, infrastructure development is seen as a key out of poverty. In fact, the United Nations just published a report showing that 3/4 of the Sustainable Development Goals will rely on infrastructure and therefore on concrete. Demand for our product from forward-looking governments around the world will also grow in the years to come. If we could have the next slide, please, Andrea. But as we also all know, there is a huge challenge. The production process causes as much as 7 to 8% of global CO2 emissions. We know there's been great progress in our industry since 1990. Around the world, we've seen an average of nearly 20% reductions. In India, as you know, and are surely proud of, the decrease is more like 40%, twice the global average. But yet, despite the progress, all of us can see that we are in a climate crisis and that we have to act decisively. Now really is the time to do more. So that's why on September the 1st, we came together to launch our Global Climate Ambition. In line with the Paris Agreement, we commit to driving down the CO2 footprint of our operations and products and to delivering carbon neutral concrete by 2050. This is a milestone, not only for our industry, not only for India, but for the world. And this message has really resonated globally. Shortly after launch, the GCCA was invited by the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, to a leadership panel on climate change to talk about the climate announcement, where we spoke alongside heads of state, the president of Microsoft, and many other distinguished speakers. A video featuring GCCA CEOs has reached over 400,000 global views. Our announcement has received more than 4 million impressions on social media. Total global media coverage was 430 articles last time we counted, including 29 here in India. So we really think that we're making the voice of our industry heard through this pledge. So now the statement has landed, how exactly is it that we're going to achieve this milestone? To move from what is now an aspiration toward binding commitment, our efforts, as Lord Turner just alluded to, will be driven by the development of a roadmap to 2050. Our roadmap will set a long-term vision for the industry and will include value chain partners, and will also include a clear plan for linking the technologies, the strategies, the policies, and the levers required to achieve that vision. It will be based, again, as Lord Turner has already eloquently talked us through, a whole life approach. Takes into account not only the production of our material, but also what happens when it becomes part of the built environment, how it's used by architects, urban planners, and builders, how it recarbonates, how at the end of its life, it gets disposed of and reused. And this makes a lot of sense to me. I like to say it's like buying an electric car. You wouldn't judge the emissions of an electric car based on the emissions produced while it was being manufactured. No, you take it onto the road and see how it performs there when it's being used for its designated purpose. So we'll publish the roadmap with a detailed implementation strategy by the end of 2021. We've already started that work with a series of consultations with regional members that's happening right now. We'll also, of course, be drawing on all of the excellent work that so many regions, including India, have been working on for several years. So what will this contain, the roadmap? Well, those who have worked on our India road mapping process will recognize a large portion of this. We will predict that we will achieve carbon neutrality through a combination of already existing techniques, plus some nods to new technologies. And these have already been discussed extensively already. So if we can get the next slide and put those up while I whip through those. Eliminating our direct energy-related emissions and maximizing the co-processing of waste for other industries. This will help to drive down the use of fossil fuels in cement manufacture. We will reduce and eliminate indirect energy emissions through renewable electricity sources. We'll reduce process emissions through new technologies and deployment of carbon capture at scale. We'll reduce the content of both clinker in cement and cement in concrete, as well as more efficient use of concrete in buildings and infrastructure. We will reprocess concrete from construction and from demolition waste to produce recycled aggregates that can be reused in concrete manufacturing. And finally, we'll quantify and enhance the level of CO2 uptake of concrete through recarbonation. It's really important to know that this will require partnerships with policymakers, technology companies, investors, customers, governments, and others. The GCCA India knows this because it's been doing its own road mapping work. There's so much depending on the right policy and the regulatory frameworks to encourage investment, to stimulate demand from customers for low carbon products, to lower the costs and de-risk carbon reduction strategies for our companies, to get the technology pilots funded and to bring them to scale. And facilitating these conversations is among the GCCA Global's top priorities. So what does this all mean for India and for GCCA India members? Well, I'm sure every single person on the call has a lot of opinions about it, but my own personal opinions start with, first of all, with as a sustainability professional by background, I would say that this is obviously good news for the planet. India is particularly vulnerable to climate change impacts. And so for a global industry that's responsible for a large percentage of the world's emissions, for us to commit to carbon neutrality is simply good news for the people of India and in other countries of the world. And it's good news for business too. In terms of business voice, this announcement is yet another signal that business is leading the way, and it's showing governments that we welcome action on climate change. In terms of GCCA India members on the call today, well, I think, first of all, the announcement will help India's producers by helping to shift the sense of skepticism that those outside of the industry sometimes have about us. I was reading the other day on Bloomberg about India's development requirements over the next few years, and an India-based journalist wrote, India will need to use a lot of steel, cement, and fossil fuels in sectors where clean alternatives aren't available or too expensive. Now that clean really hurts me. But with this announcement, we can come back to that journalist and rebut and say, we are clean. We are the sustainable building material of choice. And there is no need to to look for alternatives. We are the choice that you want for a sustainable world of tomorrow. I guess more broadly, though, it can be seen as a kind of vindication for the work that the Indian sector has been doing over a number of years. India has been a regional champion of sustainability for such a long time. You have some of the lowest CO2 emissions per ton, some of the most progressive commitments, and now there is a global context to frame the work in. So with that, I will say thank you again for inviting me today. Welcome your questions, your comments, and I'm really looking forward to your continued collaboration. Thank you.